And that can either help someone breathe on their own if they can, or in my mom's case, they hooked up the machine to the trachea so that it could breathe for her. And we saw all this go down. Now, with the trachea came improvement. My mom woke out of sedation. She was alive, aware. She couldn't talk. She was being fed through her stomach. But you could just tell in someone's eyes that they are alive. You can just tell that what's the word I'm looking for? The sparkle is there. The will to live is there. You can tell in her eyes that it was there. And she was looking frankly bored. She was looking bored at the hospital. I would go see her and she would just look so bored. And I would just tell her, hey, you're getting better. Just follow the doctor's orders. Listen to them. We're here for you. Just don't worry about that. Just focus on getting well. Yet, in typical family fashion, because my great-grandfather, when he went to the hospital, once spilled his meal all over a nurse because he didn't like the electrodes in him. He didn't like any of the stuff that was attached to him. He didn't like any of it. So he was a difficult patient. My grandmother was a difficult patient. And my mother was a difficult patient. She was fighting her treatment. Because think about this, folks. You breathe every day. Since you're alive and you're listening to this show, you breathe every single day. You breathe every single day. And you don't even give it a second thought. You don't even think about your breath. You don't even think about what you're doing. You're respirating. You're not supposed to think about it. And she was having that done for her. So yeah, it's a difficult... Breathing is a difficult habit to put down. Let me tell you. Breathing is a very difficult habit to put down. Breathing is hard to just stop. You know what I mean? Breathing is really hard to just stop. And I mean, try and hold your breath. And you maybe last a minute, 2 minutes. Maybe if you're a real fuckboy and you try to just hold your breath to see how long you're going to do it, you're going to pass out and then you're going to start breathing again. It is that automatic. And yet, that was taken away from my mom. So yeah, she was fighting a natural type of thing that you usually don't have to even think about. So that must have been really difficult. Have a machine breathe for you, jamming air into your lungs in a regular beat, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That has to be some of the most awful types of things to go through. When your mind is sound, when you know what's going on, and yet your body is dying. Think about that. That is what ALS patients have to go through. That is what quadriplegics, these people who don't have use of their arms and legs, who have machines do their every will, do everything that they were supposed to do, that they were given the ability to do by being born. Think about that. She was completely helpless. She's being fed through her stomach, and she was breathing. She had a tube breathing for her, but she had hope. They moved her out of intensive care. They moved her into what they called step down. And she was getting better. Her color was coming back. They had drained all the fluids from her body, all the fluids that had accumulated, all of the drugs that had accumulated in her body. They had drained. They'd gotten rid of. And they made sure that she was completely drug-free. She was in pain. Imagine if you had a fucking tube in your neck. She was in pain. Absolutely. But she never complained. Now, granted, you smartasses out there would be like, oh, she couldn't talk either. But yeah, you didn't see her wince. You didn't see her You didn't see her blink like she's in pain. You know what I mean? Like she had that kind of wince. You didn't see that. She didn't write down that she was feeling poorly. She couldn't write. She was in bed for so damn long that she couldn't write. She couldn't move her legs. She couldn't move her arms. She was in bed for so damn long. And yet there was hope. There was hope. And then we got some good news. Mid-April, she was moved to a rehabilitation center. Now, this place also specializes in hospice, so I'm like, oh, great. But no, this was rehab. The plan was to get her lungs strong enough so that she could breathe on her own. And while they were getting strong, they would start to exercise her arms, exercise her legs, exercise her neck, exercise those extremities that had gone dead. That was what they were doing. And that was what the plan was. Fast forward to Mother's Day. I go in and I see her. She's looking a little, tired. Her eyes, the eyes that had that same spark of life before, were a little bit dimmer, but she was in and out of sleep. I took it as she's tired. This is hard. It's hard when you're just sitting there. There's a machine breathing for you. You're not eating. You're basically a living head. That's rough. I can't even imagine what it is to be like that. Because I breathe, I live, I walk, I can't imagine any of this. I got her some things our children made and dropped them off with her and sat with her for about 2 hours. I showed her pictures. I showed her pictures of the kids the last couple of weeks, the last month. She smiled. She smiled weakly, but she smiled. She made little mouth gestures of like, oh, like, that's so cute. She laughed. She laughed. She chuckled. She laughed. She was weak, but she laughed. And I held her hand. It was warm. It was a warm hand. I massaged her feet and legs. She was cool with that because she didn't get much circulation there, so she was happy that I was doing that. One of her legs was cold, and I didn't think about that until 2 days later. But she had color. She had what little personality she could without utilizing her voice. She was on the road. Long road, bumpy road, but it was a road. She wasn't off to the side. She wasn't wrecked. She was on the road. Slowly, but she was recovering. And then the next day I'm at work, at my day job, because if I did this to support myself, I'd be homeless. And I get a call from my dad, and he's been there. You know what? Fuck this live recording shit. Keeps on going off of its damn shit here. I'll edit that out later. This is live radio, fuck it. Okay. So, finally, my dad gives me a call about 3:15. Says she's gone. And at first, I'm like, what do you mean? She's gone where? Where'd she go? Keep in mind, she was recovering. We had seen no possible outcome other than her recovery. There was no other outcome. She was moving her arms and legs. She was getting up. She was standing. She wanted to walk. She wanted to talk. And then just like that, she's gone. Just like that. And my first thought was, all right, it's time to get shit done. I left work immediately. Went home where I told my grandmother, a woman who has had to bury 2 children now. She had 3 daughters. She's outlived 2 of them. I had to sit there while she cried in my arms, while she fell apart, while my grandmother-in-law fell apart. I was the one to tell everybody, my children, my 7-year-old who wasn't going to see her grandmother again. I was the one to tell her. That was rough. But I decided to throw myself completely into the funeral preparations. And so I did. And if I may say so, planning a funeral is a bitch and a half. When I go, burn my ass. Cremate me. Cremate me and throw me in the air. I don't care where I go. I did have another idea. I wanted to die like Valhalla. You know, the Viking funeral where you're on a boat and you're sent out to sea and you're on fire. I'd love that. Funeral pyre on a boat, just be sent out to the ocean. With bagpipers playing Amazing Grace. I think that would be fucking incredible, but I also came to find out it's illegal. So, not going to be doing that. But, anyway. So, it comes the time, and I'm sitting there, and it's so surreal to me to be sitting at Rose Hills fucking cemetery, sitting there at a desk with my dad, who is broken. This is one of the strongest men I've ever known, and he is broken. He is fucking broken. And what can I do? I did all I could do. I took everything that I could. All of my resources, all of my physical and mental strength. And I basically planned the first funeral I've ever planned. I also took on the eulogy. I took on various prayers. I took on various duties of the funeral. I made sure that it was religiously proper. I made sure that people were invited. I made sure that people were notified, that where they stayed, how every frickin' detail you can think of. And I took that on because I think I was still afraid to grieve and to mourn my mother's death. Fast forward to the day of the funeral. Now, I'm working through a lot of this. Working a couple days here, one day there when I can. And then other days I'm taking off to do preparations and things like that. It's amazing how many different options there are. How many caskets are out there. How many headstones are out there. It's phenomenal how many packages are out there. How these people take such a sacred right of life and they winnow it down to package deals. Now, granted, the mortuary, the funeral home, everybody was very respectful and wonderful. It's more of the practice of it all. It's more of the practice of taking just the life of somebody and then okay, well, which package can you afford? And we were lucky to know a mortuary director who was very kind to us and very generous, and he did a great job. But, so some of the more surreal moments of that week and a half before the funeral were sitting with the bishop of her church. My mother was Latter-day Saint. Sitting with the bishop of her church in a church that I have previously reviled, in a church that I've rebelled against, and yet realizing that this was a good guy who was going to help my mom and help my dad and help everybody that he could. They offered a building for the